Hey, Michael, welcome to Crosswalk Talk. Thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
We are talking to Michael Reagan, political commentator, son of President Ronald Reagan, whose story is told in the amazing new movie, which I really enjoyed, Reagan. It's now out on home video. Michael, what were your emotions when you watched that movie? And tell me, what did you think of Dennis Quaid's performance as your father?
I think they all did a great job. I thought Penelope did a great job as Nancy. Dennis did a great job as my dad. Uh, they all did really a great job. And I have to go back 19, 20 years with Mark, who had the idea to do the Reagan movie. And see, I sat down years ago and I would just share stories with him because he knew, like at the library, they refer to me as the prequel. Because if you have a story, I have the backstory to your story. And so Mark had stories, but I had backstories to his stories. So it was nice to go and see the movie and see those stories actually in the movie. For example, the Niet that he says in Reykjavik in the movie is a story that came from me, from my dad in 1976. When my dad lost the nomination, in 1976, and I asked my dad, why do you even want to be president of the United States? And he said to me, Michael, I wanted to become president of the United States so I could sit down, be the first president, sit down with Secretary General of the Soviet Union. And while he was telling me what it was I was going to have to give up to get along with him, I was going to get up from my side of the table, walk around the other side, lean over and whisper in his ear, "Niet." So that story ultimately comes out in the movie in Reykjavik. Also, the story about Mikhail Gorbachev telling my dad in the movie that his grandmother was a Christian. He used to go to church every day, come to the Kremlin, said, Mikhail, I went to church today. I prayed for the atheists. I prayed for you. That's the story between me and Mikhail Gorbachev that I shared with Mark that made it in the movie. So it was good to see that. But really, I think the greatest feeling I had was having my son Cameron, who's now 46, my daughter Ashley, who's 41, be at the movie. I mean, they've heard the stories and they know their grandfather, but to see it in that form and see it be absolutely correct all the way through the movie and have me explain who Lou is, Lou Wasserman, and go through this process. So it was great to see it. And I thought they did a terrific job all the way through.
One thing, Michael, that really impacted me as I watched the movie was your father's faith and how it was portrayed in the movie. What role did your father's faith play in his political decisions, in his worldview?
Well, I think it showed in the beginning of the movie with his mother, who was a Sunday school teacher. Nell used to take Maureen and I to Sunday school. Dad would drop us off on Sunday morning. We'd go to Sunday school with Nell in LA when she lived in Santa Monica. So he was always there. His faith had so much to do with it, as shown when he became a Christian as a very young boy and wanted to be like that guy. And that was important. But I think what really solidified it was when he lived after being shot. And he said, he felt that he was truly saved for a reason. Interesting enough, a few months later, Pope John Paul is shot and has the same thought process because he lived and thought he was there for a higher purpose. And the two of them end up getting together. And we know what the history is from that point. So faith really meant something to him. Story that, of course, didn't make it in the movie because you could do 4 hours of my stories, was, when my dad was shot. And the next morning I would visit my father with my family in Washington. And my dad would say to me, he says, yesterday I was shot. I said, yes. He said, well, a young man who shot me, Hinckley. I said, yes, John Hinckley. He says, his parents are in the oil business, have money, don't they? I said, yes, they do. He said, you think they'd ever buy me a new suit? I mean, that's my dad's humor. But the other side is when I'm flying with him on Air Force One, Good Friday, 1988, as we're landing at Point Magoo, he counts out the number 9 on his fingers. I said, what's important about that? He said, 9 more months. I'll no longer be president. I can once again go to church. You haven't been going to church? No. Ever since I looked out the window on my limousine, saw people laying in their own blood with bullets meant for me, I have not gone to church at all on a regular basis. So I'm so looking forward to no longer being president and once again going to visit my Lord and Savior on any given Sunday morning. That was the conversation I had with my dad Good Friday, 1988, flying back from Washington, D.C. to California. So his faith played a huge role in his life.
Wow, I've never heard that story. What a powerful story.
I know that's why they call me the prequel.
You know, his friendship with Tip O'Neill is portrayed in the movie as well. Of course, Tip O'Neill was the Democratic Speaker of the House. Your father, of course, was a Republican. Why was that important to put in the movie? And secondly, does that have any lesson for today's culture? Because it seems like we've gotten away from that.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I told Mark, I said, I thought that was a seminal moment, truly, in the movie, if you're really paying attention. Because I know all the stories, so I know this stuff. So I have that in the movie and think about today in the world we live in. And here are two people who disagree with each other politically. Great moment when my dad says, you know, we're friends after 5 o'clock. When Tip O'Neill says, no, we're arguing all day. No, we're friends after 5 o'clock. But after my dad's shot, you know, waking up in the hospital room and Tip O'Neill sitting there in a chair with his rosary, praying ultimately for and with my father. And you say, would that happen in today's day and age? And unfortunately, I think not. And that's what's really sad, that we don't do these things, that we don't find ways to reach out to each other. We find ways to walk away from each other. And that's what's really sad, because they got the largest tax break in American history that in fact was passed by Tip O'Neill and my father at that time. And so you wonder, can we get back to that? And I don't know if we can ever really get back to that, but I was able to live through those moments and see those moments and understand it and be able to share that with my children, and they'll share it with their children.
I guess I have a little bit of your father's optimism in me. I hope and think we can. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next few years, but I agree with you. I love that. I love that moment in the movie. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Michael, but I'm curious, are there other lessons that we can take from your father in this movie and apply to our culture?
I think as you go through it, you know, and what I like about the movie too is it really showed warts also. It wasn't always wonderful, and you know, there were tough times, and what have you. You might go back to Iran-Contra. Name the last president that took responsibility. What happens is we get in trouble for hiding, not being forthright. And Iran-Contra, which was depicted in the movie, ended when my dad took responsibility for Iran-Contra. It was done. We don't do that. And that's what's really sad. That's another great lesson to learn. Take responsibility for your actions. And also, know what you believe and know why you believe it. So many people today believe it because a poll or a study said to believe this. And my dad believed it because he actually believed it. The books in his library, he actually read the books in his library. They weren't there to show people, hey, look at this, I have this book in my library. He actually read those books. And I think those things you can learn, but stand strong for your beliefs and, you know, who you are and what you are. And I think that's so very important. And I said this to Young America's Foundation a few weeks ago when I spoke to, 130, 160 high school students before they would go up to the ranch next day. And I told them that. I said, you know something? Know what you believe. Know why you believe it. Like me, don't believe it because your dad believed it. Believe it because you believe it. And I remember when I was doing radio and did it for 27, 28 years, somebody asked me one day, they asked me a question, I answered, they said, well, what do you believe? That's what your father believes. I realized I only believe things because my father believed it. I thought if I believed like my father believed, people would like me like they like my father. And I realized, whoa, wait a minute. I better find out why I'm pro-life. I better find out why I'm pro this. I better find out why I'm anti that. So when somebody asks me a question, I can tell them the answer based on my life, not based on my father's life.
You know, your father had strong pro-life convictions. That's one thing you're kind of referencing there. And he didn't take a poll on it. He wrote a book about it. He released a book during his presidency, I believe, about his pro-life position. And of course, he gets dinged sometimes by critics about his Supreme Court appointees. But if Robert Bork had been nominated, I mean, if Robert Bork had been confirmed, history would have been different the next 10 or 15 years. Would Roe have been overturned in the early 90s if Bork had been confirmed?
I don't know. I don't know if it would. I probably not. I was surprised that it got overturned this last time. It really got overturned because you can see the train wreck coming. Sometimes be careful what you wish for, because you better have an answer on the backside. If this is what you want and it happens, okay, now what do you do? And so now you see, what do you do? And everybody's got a different answer. What do we do? It goes to the states and what have you. So this is a mistake we make sometimes. Like, let's close the border. Okay, we close the border. But now what do you do? And it seems like we never get to what do we do? Where do we go now? And we seem to find ourselves in trouble on so many different issues in that way. We don't think far down the line. We think immediate. And unfortunately, that gets us in a lot of trouble. But again,
I was thinking.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about the Planned Parenthood v. Casey case in the early 90s. I remember it was 5-4, and I remember there being a vote there that I forgot who replaced Bork on the court. It would have been I forget. Oh, it was Kennedy. It was Kennedy. Kennedy would have been the vote that replaced Bork. So that was a big swing from Justice Bork to Justice Kennedy. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, Michael, but I just remember your father having a great impact on the pro-life cause, and that's something that we can learn from is to stand up for what you believe.
Stand up for what you believe.
And
but
what's right.
If you're going to push, we're against abortion. All right, we're going to push that. Then you better get and I think I diss the churches. All right, if you're going to push, let's not abort. Then where's your congregation at in adopting? There's 100,000 children in foster care today waiting for a home. And they're still waiting for a home. Most of the kids that come out of foster care will end up on the street without an education, and they're being trafficked around the world by these traffickers. Foster care is a direct line to trafficking. So the churches are the ones that I hold accountable, because they're pushing no abortion, but let's be pushing adoption. Start adopting children, and let's change the laws in America to make it easier to adopt a child in America than go overseas. My sister adopted a young girl from Uganda. It was easier for her to adopt a young girl from Uganda than adopt somebody from the United States of America, which is great. But again, let's make the laws easier to adopt here so we can adopt American kids instead of going overseas and adopting children from overseas.
Let's talk about a couple of happy thoughts before I let you go here. Your father, of course, ran for presidency in '76, and he lost a nail biter at the convention to President Ford, and then he ran again in '80. What were your emotions when he wanted to run again in 1980?
Well, we were all sitting at the house, having, when Dad announced he was going to run, Maureen and I and my wife Colleen, I think Patty was there. And now, see what, Patty's not a big supporter, and Colleen and I and Maureen went out for a cocktail afterwards, had a glass of wine, toasted a glass of wine. So if he doesn't make it this time, we'll run him for president of the Bar Hop and Cleaning Ladies Union or something. It was great. He get into it. The '80 was the right time. '76 was a good time for the entry into it. And as I said to Margaret Thatcher the day after the funeral, had my dad won in 1976, Cold War would still be going on, Berlin Wall would still be up, and we'd be nowhere. And she said, "Oh, Michael, why would you say that?" I said, simple. Where were you in '76? Where was John Paul? Where was Lech Walesa? Where was Václav Havel? Where was Helmut Kohl? And where was Mikhail Gorbachev? None of you were in place in 1976. Mikhail Gorbachev doesn't come into place in 1985. But in 1980, where were you? Where was Pope John Paul? Where was Lech Walesa? Where was Václav Havel? You were waiting for America to elect a strong president to lead this country to, in fact, bring freedom to the world and bring down the Berlin Wall. 76, it never would have happened, but 1980 was the right time. I said, I think God chooses the right people at the right time. 1980 was the right time and the right people. And she said, oh, Michael, I never thought of that.
I love it. I love it. I know the movie touches on this at the very end, but what do you think your father would want people to see as his legacy?
He never thought about that. He never thought about legacy. Everybody else thought about his legacy. Had he listened to other people, and this is another thing I tell kids, you know, if all you're thinking about is your legacy, you're not going to accomplish anything. I said, Reykjavik is a perfect example because his staff, everybody wanted my father to sign on to the agreement in Reykjavik that would have given up SDI and Star Wars. They believed that would be my dad's legacy, make an agreement with Mikhail Gorbachev. All you had to do was give up SDI or Star Wars. And my dad said what he told me he would say back in 1976. Yeah, no. And he walked away from Reykjavik. A year later, Mikhail Gorbachev comes to Washington and signs the INF Treaty. So again, know what you believe, know why you believe it, but don't worry about your legacy. People will find your legacy. You don't need to point an arrow at it.
Let's talk about your own work. You have written several books, Michael. Twice Adopted is one that I really loved. That was a couple of decades ago, I believe. Lessons My Father Taught Me. That was in recent years. And another one, The New Reagan Revolution. And you're still writing. Tell us about your writings right now and where folks can find your work.
I do Newsmax. I do a couple columns a week. I'm a Newsmax contributors. On Mondays, I'm on Newsmax on the Salcedo show for a few minutes. I write for Kegel, which is a newspaper column I put out every week. It comes out on Friday and what have you. You can go to @ReaganWorld. That's where I am on Twitter, X, or whatever the heck the name of it is this week, and what have you. And I have a foundation, Reagan Legacy Foundation, where we supply scholarships to men and women who serve aboard the USS Ronald Reagan. Been doing that for years. We give $1,000 scholarships to the young men who serve on the ship. We give $2,000 scholarships to the family members at home who are trying to better their education. And we have a program we're going to be ending this December 31st because we've run out of room. We work with St. Mary Glees, Normandy, France, museum there in their operation, where people go online to ReaganLegacyFoundation.org and order a brick with the name of a loved one who served in the European theater during the Second World War. We're a 501c3, 100% tax deductible. We'll put their name on it, when they served, you know, how they served, put it in the ground. We'll send you a picture of it, story. And when you go to Normandy, France, you can see that brick. If you don't know someone, just send us the donation, put in the memo, brick project. Trust me, there's enough, there's 100,000 still alive. And there's enough people that we can get a name, put it on there, and you will know the person that you sponsored a brick for. And when these guys go to Normandy and see a brick with their name on it, they cry because they think somebody cares. So we do that through the ReaganLegacyFoundation.org, plus my columns I do, showing up on Newsmax and with you.
We've been speaking to Michael Reagan, a political commentator, the son of President Ronald Reagan, whose story is told in the amazing new biopic movie, Reagan. Hey, Michael, great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Good to talk to you. Thanks so much.